Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the last 2 decades, we've had 24 or more programs to nowhere, programs that were started under one administration or one Congress and canceled or funding stopped by the next or another. And I think one of the biggest fears that we all have is that we'll have more of those, that whatever direction we ultimately agree to go in tomorrow, that the next day or the next Congress or the next administration might decide to cease and pivot into another direction, which Constellation, for example, was a wasted $9 billion. Congressman Culbertson has proposed a Real Space Act that basically would set up a board of directors comprised of astronauts, eminent scientists and such, and that board would appoint an administrator for a term of 10 years. I don't know, it's a rolling 10 years how they'll do it, but try and give some sustainability, some continuity to our space assets and our aspirations and our programs. And I realize, nobody in the near future is going to figure out how to make chicken salad out of chicken manure, but I wonder how you feel Culbertson's plan would work in reality, if you think that would be part of the answer that might help us sustain our programs. And we can start with Mr. Friedman.
Well, I'm not sure that is a magic bullet, but certainly we all want stability in the program, and anything that the Congress can do to add to that, which of course means would they really be giving up their year-by-year funding authority on programs. I think the key to sustainability really relates also to your first question, which is that public interest. If the program is exciting and bringing back results while it's undergoing, not some distant future, but something that we can do in the current decade and the next decade, and setting distance records and speed records and new accomplishment for human spaceflight, learning new things at other worlds, that's the only way we can sustain a space program. And to me, that's going to be the key to have a publicly exciting, interesting program.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that, in the sense that regular milestones on short time scales are critical. You need to craft a program that provides payback that can be seen under reasonable lengths of time, 5 years, 4 years, something like that. If you don't have the program structured that way, you're trying to bite off too big of a chunk. I need a giant 50-ton lunar lander, and I got to have it by this date. You're not going to go anywhere. You're going to consign yourself to future programs to nowhere. So what I've tried to do is to look at this from a systems point of view. How can I craft a program where I use small pieces? Each one is not particularly expensive in itself, but can be operated together as a complex system. And I think that can be done. And one of the values of going to the moon is that it's close enough to where you can do that. You can actually use robotic systems to create bigger complex systems out of small pieces. So that gives you the ability to start returning regular progress on very short time scales. And I think that's the key to long-term sustainability.
I'm not personally familiar enough with Mr. Culbertson's proposed plan to comment on whether it is the key to maintaining program stability.
No, not the key. No program's perfect, but just your initial thoughts.
Well, I agree with the previous two speakers that establishing and maintaining stability in this program is critically important. And while the money that gets wasted is a big problem, I think another very big problem has to do with squandering our most precious resource. The most precious thing that NASA has is not SLS, it's not Orion, it's not the Curiosity rover, it's the NASA workforce and the knowledge base that they possess. And what I see when I see NASA changing direction on timescales of a few years is I see demoralization of that workforce, and I see erosion of that workforce. And I am constantly discouraged when I see immensely talented young engineers and young scientists who currently work for NASA deciding that the best place for them to pursue their goals in space is someplace else. And if we cannot maintain a continuity of vision and a continuity of purpose within the agency, we are going to lose that workforce, we're going to lose that capability, and NASA will no longer be able to do what it currently can do.
Well, they did that after Apollo, and they're doing it after Shuttle, and I don't think anybody at NASA actually laid a hand on the vehicles, but all the people that did are looking for jobs now. They're out of work, and they're not going to come back when you call them to come back. It is a tremendous loss of talent and personnel.
I've read that plan that you mentioned, and I think it has merit, and it merits discussion. I go back to the fact, though, that you do need a stable strategic plan on human spaceflight as well, and then that sort of a structure could then be one you'd have confidence, perhaps, in to manage it. So I think that's important, and I'll use an example of where stability made a huge difference in a program, and it was space station. In the late '80s and early '90s, the funding was up and down, very much like what's going through on SLS and MPCV, Orion. And we went through a redesign. I was in the middle of all that. I led the engineering under Brian O'Connor and then Bill Shepard. But we came out of that with an approach, and we got stable funding for a number of years. And whereas the program before Space Station Freedom was redesigning and renegotiating contracts every year, we had stable funding that we were able to plan against and actually make progress. And I think without that stability and funding that we got back then, it was $2.1 billion a year, I believe, we might not have made it. And the space station is a credit to everybody who ever worked on it, because it's an incredible feat. But the stability, that is an example of where stability turned a program around, in my view.
And that was sustained by, at one time, one vote in the House.
Yes, it was, and it was right at that time. It was. Yeah.
Thank you.